Hi everyone, Benoit Blanc here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of having a comedy accent that gets remembered far more than how good of a performance you gave. And today, we are going to be talking about my top picks for the honourable mentions of 2022. Oh, here it is, the most exciting time of the year, Christmas be damned, it's all about the year-end lists. All joking aside, I truly do love this time of year, and this is the first time I've been looking at from the time of filming at least, present time and up-to-date review of my favourite albums of the year. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the records that didn't quite make the grade to be on the main list. That's not to say anything overtly negative or otherwise about these records. Each and every one of these is good, and some of them are great. But they just lacked a certain je ne sais quoi in order to be considered in the main list. Due to the honourable mention nature of this list, I'm not putting these in any form of descending numerical order. I lost enough sleep doing that with my main list, I'm not putting myself through that nightmare of decision making twice in 1 year. No, instead we will be looking at these purely alphabetically, and as there's 15 of these damn things, we're only going to be touching on them as a brief summary about, why I liked them, as going into too much depth would end up with a video of monstrous proportions that only the truly masochistic would actually want to sit through. With that being said though, let's dive in. The festive season is so often associated with cheese and wine in the dark evenings, sat by a roaring fire with the smell of pine needles in the air. Now, whilst this album may not be able to provide you with sufficient alcohol content or even arboricultural content, it damn sure provides you with more than enough of your daily allowance of premium stinking bishop and then some. Tobias Sammet's latest release from his rock opera project Avantasia is a tremendous amount of fun. It's not especially big and or clever, but it never tries to be anything more than what it knows it is. This is a record that firmly stays within its allotted space, but it manages to be all the better for it. Tobias knows exactly what he wants to achieve with Avantasia at this point in his career, and Moonflower Society has done so in spades. You can expect lots of memorable riffs, powerful, soaring vocal performances, incredibly silly lyrics, and all the key changes in the climactic moments that your body can handle. This is a record I can recommend to anyone who's looking for a good time without any complications or real attention needed. A fun and relentlessly entertaining slice of campy, feel-good, energetic metal to warm the cockles of your heart on even the dreariest of days.
Come take a trip in my airship. Come take a sail among the stars. Come have a ride around.
Now, this one is a fun one, but curiously enough, I believe this is the only album across both lists that I actually haven't done a full review of. Oops. Now, you could argue this is very naughty and bad of me, and that only record that I've talked about already should be on here, but frankly, tough luck, it's going on the list anyway. This is a fantastic little record that came to my attention via Nathan on Shuffle, so big thank you, Nathan, for pointing me towards this one, it's really good. To describe this band and this album succinctly, imagine a sort of a vaudeville 1920s aesthetic, The Deer Hunter, and you'll be kind of on the right track. This is actually technically the soundtrack to a short film of the same name that you can view right here on YouTube, and it's this marvellous Silver Age style piece of cinema, all black and white and full of the energy of the Roaring Twenties, much like the music that's to be found on this record. I had tremendous fun with this album. It's a cheeky, bawdy, raucous good time. Lots of oompa, some children's choir, period instrumentation, and a wonderful sense of frivolity and good humour about it. It's never going to win any awards for depth of lyricism or complexity of instrumentation, but honestly, this really isn't that kind of record. Queen of the Night is an unapologetic love letter to a bygone era, and it fully embraces the glitz and the glamour of a masquerade ball from 1922. It's honestly quite difficult to wear a frown whilst listening to this one, so if you're a little glum, maybe you've had a bad day, listen to Come Take a Ride in My Airship and try not to grin like an idiot. This is a wonderful little album for anyone with a playful sense of humour. Okay, this one was one of 3 different records within a very similar category of metal that was really vying for inclusion on my top 15 list. And unfortunately for Disillusion, wasn't quite up to the same standards as the other 2. I mean, not to say that Ayam is a poor record, goodness no. This is honestly one of my favourite records of 2022, and it really does speak more of the quality of the other records it was up against, rather than speaking against the quality of this one. Disillusion have finally come back to us with a record of comparative excellence to their face-meltingly brilliant debut record. This absolutely adheres to the familiar DNA and structures of the band, but they've come out swinging, fired up on an energising confidence and swagger. It is extremely gratifying to know that this band, despite their extended absence from the scene, is still capable of writing some of the most gut-punchingly brutal, head-bangingly savage progressive metal around. Don't let this record only being on the honourable mentions list fool you. This was very nearly riding high on the main list. And if you like your progressive metal on the heavy side, you really don't want to miss out on this one. One of the later releases of the year, Widdershins as Regardless left a very positive impression on me. I generally find that at this point in my life, a neo-prog band has to do an awful lot to either impress me or hold my attention. There's only so much, hey, do you remember Genesis? Do you remember Genesis? That I can stomach before I think to myself, yeah, but I'd rather just be listening to Genesis. Gandalf's fists have neatly sidestepped this hurdle with Widdershins, bringing forth a record that is not only respectful and pays homage to the past masters, but they've also firmly stamped their own brand and identity upon the music to bring something that can only be described as quintessentially Gandalf's fist. Widdershins is a quirky, creative, and altogether thoroughly entertaining romp from one of the more interesting neo-prog bands doing the circuit right now. From the powerful, gutsy female vocals to the crunching technicality of the guitars, and most importantly, the dizzying excellence of the compositions, especially on album closer Cave, which is easily one of the best big prog epics to come out this year. Widdershins is an excellent way to spend your time, and a record that I have been getting very well acquainted with of late. You can always bet on one thing with me, and that's bet on Haken. I had enjoyed the absolute bejesus out of Ross Jennings' solo record last year, and ditto for Richard Henschel's earlier. So I was besides myself with excitement when I saw that Charlie Griffiths was getting on board the solo train too, to joining his bandmates in their success with their own projects. Delightfully, and frankly completely expectedly, Tiktaalika is a fantastic record, skirting the line nicely underneath what you would come to expect from one of the Haken boys, to create something simultaneously very familiar sounding, but also singularly unique against the backdrop from whence it came. Whereas Richard's record was a more experimental album and Ross's was more of a pop metal album, Charlie has most assuredly embraced the heavier side of progressive metal, weaving in elements of thrash and death amongst the more familiar elements of odd time signatures and keyboard solos. There's a flurry of great special guests providing vocal duties on this album, including my very favourite Tommy Rogers, from Between the Buried and Me. Oh, Tommy. And they all helped Charlie out in creating what is easily my favourite album from any of the Haken boys. This is absolutely worth more than a few listens, and has cemented itself as one of the best things to come out from the UK this year. Needless to say, when Haken drop their 7th studio album next year, Fauna, Muggins here will be sat at the front of the queue with a little Haken-branded fanboy hoodie on, eager to hear what they've been up to. Here we go, one of my favourite surprise discoveries, and easily a poster child for why I frequent music review sites across all genres and not just prog. King Buffalo's Regenerator is easily one of the most effortlessly enjoyable records I've listened to this year. The chilled out nature of the music, coupled with the down-tempo, unaggressive stylings, make for a seriously enjoyable record. I've always made a conscious effort to keep my mind open to music outside of my usual wheelhouse, and King Buffalo has made me extremely glad that I did. Now, I would never describe this kind of music as something that I would avoid. It is not something I would normally seek out, though. But Regenerator struck a resonant chord within me, and is one of my most revisited records of 2022. I've honestly been kind of pretty high-strung and stressed out this year, and this album has served as a delightful panacea for many a wound-up evening. Something about the combination of the vocals, the instrumentation and the spacey atmospheres throughout combined to make for a record I can heartily recommend to anyone who's getting, burnt out from the pressures and stresses of modern living. Crank up the volume, peace out, head into outer space. Sometimes bands will make a hard 180 with their sound, and it pisses off absolutely everyone. Major Parkinson's latest release is probably seen like this by a great many of their fan base, and you know what, I get it. I understand absolutely why a long-term fan would think this record is musical diarrhea. But I, however, would disagree with these feelings personally, as I really had an amazing time with this album, and I'm not about to back down from this stance anytime soon. Velvet Prison is a wonderful slice of Miami Vice-tinted expressionism, and it values entertainment above anything else. There's the brilliance of the contrasting vocal moods, infectious and melodic keyboards and synth, and a really strong narrative through line to the entire record that really bumped this one up in my estimations, despite my established expectations prior to listening to it. Look, I get it. I get that it's a lot more pop music than anything they've done before, but Major Parkinson are clearly adhering to a theme and concept here, and I applaud them for sticking to it so rigidly. Consequences be damned. If this isn't your cup of tea, then I absolutely get it, but I've been finding myself reaching for this one time and time again whenever I need something unabashedly entertaining on an otherwise dreary afternoon. It's jazz time, baby. Loungy, smoky, sophisticated. Nice. Okay, so it's not exactly lounge jazz we're talking about here. This is more in the territory of, oh my actual god, what is going on, jazz. And I love that. I absolutely love that. Now, jazz is often characterised by its musical virtuosity, but Marbin have taken that idea and run with it to a degree I didn't really think was possible. Now, I'm no stranger to excellence in musicianship given my default genre of choice, but the talent on display on this record is absolutely mesmerising. And not even from a technicality perspective, the restraint and tastefulness of some of the compositions on here are just incredible to listen to. Marbin has the honour of being the only instrumental act to appear on either of my lists. Spoilers! As I generally find instrumental-only albums difficult to appreciate or digest properly, especially when they're as lengthy as Dirty Horse. But believe me when I tell you that this album is so intricate, so well balanced, and so refined that you will neither notice the length nor the lack of vocals. This album absolutely knocked my socks off again and again, and I reckon if you've got even the slightest inclination towards stylish, groovy, and above all sunglasses in a darkened room cool, then you'll have an amazing time with this one, and you absolutely shouldn't let this one pass you by. Is a year without a new Motorpsycho release really a year at all? Okay, sure, they're not quite so prolific as the likes of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, but then short of Buckethead, who is? The Norwegian prog rockers Motorpsycho are nonetheless not shy of releasing a plentiful cornucopia of music. Ancient Astronauts is a relatively brief, by Motorpsycho standards, record, but nevertheless extremely enjoyable slice from this veteran band. There's admittedly nothing on here that will dazzle or amaze long-term fans. This is very much resolutely a Motorpsycho album, but with that being said, there's nothing on here that will disappoint in that regard. Motorpsycho have been doing this for a good long while now, and they know their sound better than almost any other band out there knows theirs. They know what works, they know what doesn't, and they know how to have complete ownership over what they want each album to do. Ancient Astronauts is a delightfully capable and enjoyable slice of everything you've come to expect from the band. Don't expect the wheel to be reinvented, of course, and you'll probably have a really good time with Ancient Astronauts.
End of days, end of days. End of days, end of days.
This album, the more I've listened to it, reminds me a lot of one of my favourite records of 2021, Astral Pariah by Trophy Scars. Not because this music is particularly comparable, but because it shares such a similar thematic vibe that it's sometimes easy for me to forget that these albums are by two different bands. Murder by Death have captured the melancholic spirit of the Old West on this record, and it serves as a wonderfully morose way to spend an evening. And I really do mean that in the most positive way, of course, as music has to serve all of our moods, not just the good ones. This record has served as my soundtrack to a dour time quite often this year, and I've honestly found it to be a remarkably cathartic record. Everything here is dripping in a rich and smoky atmosphere. Everything feels like you're walking through quicksand, desperate for a hint of relief or happiness, but spellbound refuses you. It's a fantastic exercise in how to use negative moods and feelings to craft something that ultimately leaves you feeling positive, despite how oppressive some of the cuts on this album can be. It's not all gloom though, there's a sort of sorrowful hope to it all as well, as if it's trying to tell you that even though things are dark right now, the dawn is coming, and coming in strong. It's been a firm favourite of mine this year, and I've been thoroughly enjoying exploring their back catalogue since discovering this one. I know for a fact that this one will be featuring pretty high on a lot of my peers' lists, but shock horror, it's only on my honourable mentions. What gives Mr. Rhymes signatures? What's with the placement of this one? Truthfully, this is only on this list as the quality of the top 15 was so utterly absurd this year that something eventually had to give. Regardless, the Myth of the Mostrophus is, frankly, the best Spock's Beard album since Snow. You know, even though it's not Spock's beard, but with the guest list on this album, it might as well be, damn it. All the right ingredients are here, with the catchy melodies, huge keyboards and fantastic vocals. Everything has that classic late 90s Spock's Beard vibe, and I'm frankly all here for it. I've always loved me a bit of Spock's Beard, but between me and you guys, I don't honestly feel they've been the same since Neil Morse left. I mean, yeah, they produced some good records, but for me, never anything great. Ryo Okumoto has decided to buck that trend by releasing some of the best, most satisfying neoprog in about 20 years. I honestly love every song on this album, but it's the title track epic that really seals the deal with this one. Its absurd, ridiculous and over-the-top lyricism would be completely cringe-inducing in the hands of a lesser artist, but everyone involved here knows how silly the lyrics on this are, and they just go full ham on it, and they absolutely nail the landing. And that's not to even say anything of the jaw-dropping compositions over its 22-minute runtime either. Yes, this is a remarkable record, and I still feel a bit dirty for not placing it in my overall top 15, but I'll get over it and I'm sticking to my decisions. And I'm hoping that once you see my big list, you'll see why it was such a hard choice for me. Regardless, this is still top-tier prog rock and an absolutely essential album. Oh boy, yeah, here we are. This had been at the top of my hype list, like the absolute top of the hype list for 2022. You know, it's sodding Porcupine Tree for crying out loud, and it was a new studio album from them. Like, basically baiting every prog rock fan with pure platinum-enrobed diamond-studded gold. I sort of blame myself partly for this. Getting swept up a little bit too much in the hype train was all too easy, and in truth, I had set my expectations too high for this album. Is it good? Absolutely yes. Is it better than The Incident? You betcha. Is it better than anything else in their discography? Let's be real here though. The fact that this album exists at all is something of a bloody miracle in and of itself. And the fact that it's actually good and not an enormous greasy brown streak on the good name of British prog rock is something I am endlessly grateful for. I don't know, I guess I'd started to doubt the legacy of Mr. Stephen Wilson as I vehemently disliked The Future Bites. And and I had ultimately learnt to deal with the fact that a new Porcupine Tree might never happen, only for him to go, oh yeah, by the way, it's the new album in 2022. Now, I know I sounded a little bit negative about this album, it's on my honourable mentions list, which is, like, ridiculous. These are albums I liked enough to include on the list. So, why the grumbling? Why the negativity? Honestly, it's only because I hold Porcupine Tree to such an absurd standard. This band was my absolute everything for the better part of 15 years of my life. My emotions towards this record are strong and sometimes conflicting, but ultimately, and crucially, I did like this album. I liked it a lot. And for me to be able to say that about a new Porcupine Tree album in 2022 is honestly all I needed to be able to say about it. This one might grow on me as the years pass by, but I think I'm honestly still in shock that it's real. Definitely give this one a listen if you haven't already, and take a moment to appreciate that we can hold this record in our hands at last, after so many years of brutal and unforgiving cock-teasing. Oh, look who it is, my literal favourite Dutch musician, Avantasia Lucassen, has once again delivered the goods. Oh, love it. Following the deeply, deeply disappointing Transitus, though, I was hoping for something a little bit lighter, looser, and less intimidating than a new Aerion record as the follow-up. And lo and behold, my prayers were answered with a new Star One record. Sci-fi, metal, movies, all things a growing boy needs to claim true enjoyment out of life, I'm sure you'll all agree. Star One has always been one of my favourite projects of Ayam, and this new third LP, Under the Banner, is an absolute belter. Not only has he managed to stick to the sci-fi movies motif, he's dug even further into specific territory, with every song based on a sci-fi movie about time travel. Much like the earlier discussed record from Avantasia, Revel in Time is pure, focused, extraordinary fun. The proggier side of Ayam is left a little bit on the wayside as we jump into cheesy jams, huge choruses, and soaring vocals from a truly staggering list of guest vocalists. I honestly had such a good time with this album, and it was delightful to see Ayam returning to such an entertaining concept. If he could just revisit Guilt Machine next, I'll be able to die a happy man. Hint, hint, Ayam. Ah, yes, Canada's most lovely music-based individual might have missed out on a top spot position this time round, but that doesn't mean I didn't have a good time with this record, or more specifically the deluxe version of it. Yeah, look, I'm just going to be a little bit real here. If we're talking about the main disc and the main disc alone, this would likely not be on the honourable mentions list, as I felt that for Townsend this was a little bit of a misfire. Not strictly speaking a bad record, no, God, but a little bit safe, unadventurous, and kinda bland. In fact, if I was to sort of like make a comparison, I would say Lightwork is the vanilla ice cream of Devi's discography. Easy to consume, but lacking in depth, complexity, or anything especially interesting. But then you add Nightwork into the mix. Things get a little bit spicy. It's like adding salted caramel chunks, sprinkles, or little shards of peppermint bark to that vanilla ice cream. You still get the familiar flavours, sure, but then there's these little pockets of texture and contrast that really elevate what is otherwise a fairly pedestrian experience into something far more satisfying. And that's really how it is with Lightwork for me. Now, I will never not love Devin's work. His signature sound is the audio equivalent of a weighted blanket to me. It's comforting, reliable, and something I can come back to time and time again. But this really needed something a little bit more if it was to be any kind of serious top 15 contender. As things are, though, I still had a really good time with this album, and I can still recommend this, especially if you're not as familiar with his work. But don't expect anything groundbreaking, and you'll still walk away from this smiling.
Found a loophole in creation's law. So
Ooh, look who it is! A very old friend here. So old, in fact, that this was the very first album I reviewed on this channel way back when at the start of the year. Oh gosh, how time flies. How nervous I seemed, how uncertain of myself, and how little did I know that nearly a year later I'd be talking about this one again. Wilderun are one of the great new hopes of progressive metal. Still a reasonably young band, Epigone is their 4th studio release and follows on the heels of 2 of the best releases in modern memory, Sleep at the Edge of the Earth and Veil of Imagination. So my anticipation for this one was like up here, sky high, baby. Well, I do feel though this one did slightly miss the mark, but the previous 2 records, I still had a marvellous time with this one. It contains all the appropriate hallmarks of their sound, with grandiosity, epic, swelling theatrical passages thrown into the mix between slamming guitar riffs and soaring vocals. It's all here and it's all accounted for. But I don't know, I felt almost as if the band were kind of maybe holding themselves back a little bit compared to earlier releases. I don't know. Perhaps it was the dialing back of the death growls, the greater emphasis on the orchestrations. I don't know, something just wasn't quite scratching the itch in the way they used to for me. Now, don't get me wrong here, this is still a phenomenal record and a wonderful starting point for the band if you're not familiar with them. But this really does feel like, I don't know, more of a springboard into their more creative and adventurous earlier works than a record I would pick over them. Regardless, Epigone does still have some of my favourite music of 2022 within its runtime though, and if you're a fan of theatrical, folksy, progressive metal with some hints of classic Opeth, then I cannot recommend this one enough. So yeah, I mean, there we go, there you have it, 15 of them. Those were my picks for the honourable mentions of 2022. Now, there's still a lot of albums I've listened to this year that I really did love, but they didn't quite make it into this list. I mean, there's the new Threshold, Psychonaut, Evership, Queensryche, Crippled Black Phoenix, Long Distance Calling, Sail, Kardashev, Astronoid, Moontooth, Evergrey, Pure Reason Revolution. God, I just keep on going. God, 2022 has been absolutely amazing for new music, and I have felt truly spoiled for choice. But I do stand by these decisions, and I'm pretty happy with this list. But honestly, I'd love to hear more about what you liked this year, and what records just missed out on your big end-of-year list. Let me know about them by commenting down there. You know, I'd really love to hear some of the things I perhaps missed out on. Next up, though, is of course the main list. Ooh, the top 15, and man oh man. Am I ever excited to talk about those ones? The controversy, the missing ones, the surprises. Ooh, love it. If you did like this video, please do share it around with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Please do consider subscribing for some more content, and if you do like my stuff, please also do consider clicking my Ko-fi link below to help support the channel. Until next time, guys, keep your rhyme signatures odd.